Abilities, how I enjoy your implementation. You can really make or break a Pokemon so easily. For every huge power or sheer force, you have a runaway or tangled feet. What's up YouTube? It's your boy Oak and your favorite cloud chaser. Not all abilities are created equal, and I wouldn't have them any other way. It's interesting that while we have a slew of offensively oriented abilities, the defensive options are lacking. I understand the defensive play isn't as well regarded as offensive is, but I still think it needs its place. Especially if Pokemon doesn't want to keep churning out Pokemon like Toxapex, Dondozo, or Tinglu to keep the offensive Pokemon from one-shotting everything. I argue that defensive abilities should be more prevalent, and the addition of offensive abilities makes it even harder to make defensive ones unique. Pokemon has introduced a multitude of ways to increase your offensive firepower. 2 choice items, the Life Orb, items to increase the power of one specific type, all the plates, the Expert Belt, the Punching Glove. There's a lot. Now let's look at all the items that can help you reduce the amount of incoming damage. Assault Vest and all the type reducing berries, I guess. And compound that with all the damage increasing abilities versus the myriad of damage reducing abilities. Ugh. There are more than 3 Pokemon. Ugh. Well, that's not really a lot of Pokemon, is it? And most of these abilities are super conditional. Maybe it's only one or a few types given that Pokemon has only a few weaknesses. Well, actually in the case of Solid Rock and its clones, I think they're a good idea of what to shoot for. It's just the problem of these abilities either being on Pokemon with really low defensive stats or quad weakness. And it's pretty much just both for the Pokemon that have them, except like Necrozma. Most offensive Pokemon are gunning for an Oko, and the problem is that some slower Pokemon just won't get a chance to fire off as many moves because they can't ever passively offset the pressure. If they have one that might be good, but in many cases, especially singles, it can be to their detriment. Take Escavalier. It's a strong Pokemon, good moveset, amazing defensive typing, and good stats, but it has 2 flaws: its fire weakness and its lack of longevity. And I guess its speed too, but we're not talking about that right now. It can't heal itself reliably, so how can we make sure it can compete with a fast offensive Pokemon like, let's say Dragapult, for instance? It doesn't have any way of mitigating damage apart from shell armor, and it gets fried to flamethrower. But what if that wasn't the case? I propose that we should have more damage reduction abilities in order to let some Pokemon have more room to throw out moves. Case in point, Escavalier. What if shell armor was like Assault Vest as an ability? It would allow you to take special hits better at the cost of not being able to run any status moves. What if you could stack another Assault Vest on top of it? Sound familiar? Escavalier wouldn't be able to use status moves, but it would be a worthy trade-off since special attacks would do significantly less, enhancing its longevity by allowing it to take more hits on the special side that type fire primarily covers. Shell Armor isn't the only ability that I thought like this. Obviously there's Battle Armor, who I personally think should be the physical variant of Shell Armor, but I'm trying to cover more bases here, so let's move on to something else, shall we? Pressure isn't good. I mean, it can be good, but it's only good if you're intentionally playing slow, which most folks don't find fun. So how can we make it serve its purpose to make you able to outlast your opponent without overdoing the inherently stally aspect of pressure? Damage reduction. It would be a smaller reduction, let's say 20 or 25%, but it only applies to moves that aren't super effective to the user, meaning when you are unable to provide a weakness against these Pokemon, they feel tankier than they are without buffing their stats. Plus, the Pokemon that tend to have this ability are legendaries, or Pokemon with a unique distinction for being exceedingly rare. So unless you're hitting them super effectively, they should feel tough, like a real obstacle. A few non-legendary Pokemon now have a real choice to make. Do you want to reduce the amount of damage you get from a lot of neutral sources? Or do you want to take proactive action? Maybe you want to make sure you can stay on the field as long as possible. Leaf Guard gets clowned on a lot. Not only is it on a typing weak to the type that the weather condition it relies on boosts, but its status immunity isn't enough of a boon for it to really be used. But what if that was just the tip of the iceberg? What if it did something else? Something greater? On top of the status immunity, Pokemon who have Leaf Guard should not take super effective damage while in the sun. All super effective hits become neutral hits. Is it strong? Absolutely, it's an absurd ability on a type with 5 weaknesses, one being the previously mentioned fire type, and it would still face competition from Chlorophyll. And faster Pokemon tend to squeeze out KOs more than slower Pokemon. Unsurprisingly, taking the risk of being slower for the ability to stomach more hits is a trade-off that I'm pretty sure at least some would take. Tangrowth being the premier example, as its weaknesses make it hard for it to tank, but with its new ability, plus a boosted synthesis, taking it down may become an issue for some teams. 4-1 and Anticipation are abilities that I think should be in the damage reduction camp. If you're being notified of a powerful or super effective move, I think they should be able to mitigate the super effective damage, but that would step on Solid Rock's toes, would it not? So what if it was a one-off on the trade of being able to only use it once, but the effect is more powerful? You take a third of the original damage, but it's only once, so you'd have to switch in to re-trigger it. You know what's also a way of making sure that you can work defensively? Healing off any damage you can take. While I don't mind the PP reduction of healing moves, I think more abilities should heal more to compensate for the lack of stalling potential with it. In other words, Ice Body, Dry Skin, and Rain Dish, they should heal more. Ice Body and Rain Dish should probably heal as much as Poison Heal as long as the weather conditions are online, and Dry Skin should heal or hurt a bit more, let's say 1/6 instead of 1/8. Speaking of weather, I do think that the moves and abilities are in need of a change. You aren't incentivized to use it in a slower fashion, and are mostly incentivized to use it offensively, which it can be fun, but it's limiting sometimes. Should permanent weather come back? Well, no. The problem is that abilities that were suited for an offensive role don't care if it's only up for a few turns, because they're aiming to hit fast and hard. Slower Pokemon who want to exhaust the opponent of their resources can't do that, because even if they have the time to, the weather won't keep up with them. I would like for them to make it so that abilities who set weather are permanent as long as the Pokemon's on the field. Then, if the Pokemon is switched out or its abilities change or something of that nature, the countdown starts. You only have 3 turns of weather before it goes away, but if you switch into a Pokemon with an identical ability, it gets refreshed. This forces teams who want to adopt a slower playstyle to keep one of their Pokemon alive, and more offensive teams can keep the uptime with the weather as high as possible. Honestly, I'm more so spitballing with this one. I like weather, but I don't want it to be over-essentializing like it was in Generation 5. Let me know what we could do to make weather more suitable for a slower playstyle, because I'm not super confident on this idea myself. But while we're on the subject of weather, I do want to talk about Cloud9 a little bit. On top of its weather negating ability, this ability would force the counter to go down, regardless if the Pokemon is active on the field or not. As an added bonus, I would like it to affect terrains as well. Terrains are really interesting. I just think that I would like if this ability affected terrains as well, which would give most of these Pokemon a use case for being able to have a strategy against terrain instead of running your own user. Frisk. Man, this ability sucks. Well, it sucks in a game that can give you open team sheets, which is the format Pokemon uses in their tournaments. Well, it doesn't really do a whole lot in closed team sheets either. I think it can and it should do more though. While this idea is a bit less defensively oriented, it can be used in such a fashion, in order to potentially reduce damage. My idea is once per battle, when a Pokemon with Frisk is sent out, not only is the item of the opposing Pokemon identified, they are rendered unusable by the Pokemon that hold them. The idea being that those items were seized by the frisking Pokemon. Obviously the exceptional items would be unaffected, but still can stop a Choice Lock Pokemon from shredding or a Sash Pokemon from being able to stomach a hit. This still comes at a huge opportunity cost of running another ability just so you can deny up to 2 Pokemon their items. It can be worth it in certain scenarios, I assume. But the Pokemon that have these abilities are typically missing out on some rather impressive abilities in their own right. Curse Body is in a similar place in my opinion. It's not bad, but it's not strong enough to warrant widespread use. So how do we make it good? Simple. We make it automatically activate if you OHKO the Pokemon from full or you hit it super effectively, as well as having its original effect for regular moves. You might say that it's too targeted towards Ghost and Dark types, which all the Curse Body Pokemon have, and I will smugly reply, yeah, that's the point. If some abilities are spiteful towards certain types or categories, then abilities like these aren't out of the ordinary. Both of these abilities are a twofold purpose. Not only does it provide Pokemon a lot more niche utility in scenarios where they can find more use in, but these all make one specific ability more desirable: Mold Breaker. Mold Breaker, an ability that lets you ignore other abilities, is a powerful tool in the right hands, but it has so few use cases. Obviously everyone knows about Excadrill, Earthquaking, or Rotom or something, but that's normally it. There aren't enough stupid damage reduction abilities to make this thing worthwhile. And in general, the lack of defensive abilities make it so that offense is always king. There is a balance to be had. It seems like defensive Pokemon are having a hard time dealing with the offensive powerhouses that come into play, and stats alone shouldn't solve the problem. Abilities give Pokemon something more to them. They give them their unique spice or flavor that lets them fulfill their role, and Mold Breaker can help in taking that special thing away and make sure that you can hit them as hard as possible without having to account for ability-based shenanigans messing you up. Thank y'all for watching. Just a few announcements I want to get up before I end the video. I am now finally playing Pokemon Reborn. Doing it live on Twitch, same name over there. I stream on Wednesdays and sometimes on weekends. So the review is being made while I'm playing the game. Just note that I do spoil bits and pieces of the game while we're streaming, so if you just want my pure unfiltered thoughts, that's where you'll get them. As for my videos between that and this one, they'll focus a little bit less on Pokemon after the next one, as I have other videos in the background that need to be finished. So I do hope you'll stick with me when those finally get released. I do very much like Pokemon, but just a small video here and there not talking about it will do good things for the soul. Plus I get to use my other persona for videos that don't involve Pokemon. But with that all being said, this is Oaken64, signing out.